Everything we know about modern life relies on just two companies, each perilously dependent on each other. And yet, no one seems to care that one disruption could topple our society. In this week's Modern Problems YouTube channel video, we'll cover how the modern semiconductor industry functions and why you should be concerned about it. Let's find out just how quickly things can go wrong. Accounting for just 0.5% of global GDP on their own, semiconductors power trillions of dollars of commerce, entertainment, travel, finance, and even national defense. Yet these critical chips are so vulnerable to trade wars, supply chain disruptions, and most recently, actual wars. How did we become so reliant on these little devices? And what makes our supply chain so exposed? And why the hell do we basically rely on one company to make the best ones? A semiconductor is merely a device that falls in between a conductor, like copper, and an insulator, like rubber, typically made out of silicon, hence the name Silicon Valley. From this basic definition, there are several applications, but we most commonly think of semiconductors as a chip that controls the electricity in a computer, whether it be a simple transistor or a complex integrated circuit, or IC for short. Any device that you can think of that runs on electricity must have semiconductors to control that electricity. Calculators, computers, cell phones, TVs, factory controls, weapons, and the list goes on and on. This device was first invented in 1958, and since then, they've come to dominate modern life as nothing, not even your car, works without them. The industry was originally dominated by American giants like Texas Instruments, but has evolved over the years as bifurcation took place between the chip designers and the chip manufacturers with fabs or fabrication sites. Most companies that you think of in the chips industry, like Nvidia, which on any given day could be the most valuable company in the world, AMD, Super Microcomputer, fall in the first fabless, no, not fabulous category, meaning all they do is design and market the chips for specific applications. Meanwhile, the actual manufacturing of the chips, especially the most advanced or smallest chips, is done by just three, soon to be two potentially companies. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, the biggest and the best, Samsung, and Intel, for now at least. Samsung and TSMC alone have about 78% market share in the chips manufacturing business, which is absolutely insane considering this market is worth about $628 billion a year in sales. Why is this industry so consolidated, you may ask? Well, have you tried to make an electrical device that's 1 billionth of a meter, aka a nanometer wide, with perfect precision? As you can imagine, it's both very difficult technologically and also very expensive. TSMC, for example, spent $20 billion on its Fab Number 20, which is set to mass produce 2 nanometer chips in late 2025. Samsung Electronics, the only really notable competitor, can only muster 3 nanometer chips. These insanely tiny chips are the best of the best in terms of efficiency, performance, and density for use in high power computers, iPhones, sensitive military technology, and yet only two companies can produce them. Now, going back to the fact that a fab costs $20 billion to build, why is that? Well, it's because of the equipment and the need for precision, obviously. And who provides said equipment? Well, that's ASML Holding, the world's leading and basically only supplier of advanced photolithography equipment in the extreme ultraviolet range. This equipment is fundamentally necessary to the production or printing of the world's most advanced chips. And who are ASML's top customers? Funny you may ask, it's TSMC, Samsung Electronics, and Intel. So essentially, what I'm saying is that the most powerful chips that are absolutely positively necessary for the AI revolution, modern militaries, the entire auto industry, every single device, basically modern life, are only possible because of two, maybe three companies. Now, it doesn't take a supply chain expert, although I do have a supply chain degree, to tell you that this is a very exposed, vulnerable supply chain, relying on two or three suppliers for a critical technology that is part of the core competency of, I don't know, the most valuable companies and strongest militaries in the world, is a bad idea. Looking into the geopolitics of this situation, It's absolutely certifiably insane. The fabric of modern society is literally dangling on a thread. So, as I mentioned, TSMC is a pretty big player. Well, actually, an industry gargantuan. All those great chip stocks that you and your trader friends lever up on, like NVIDIA, AMD, ARM, they all contract out the manufacturing of their designs to TSMC because no one else can make them with the level of precision and scale to run an effective business. Even Samsung will outsource their manufacturing to TSMC. Now, does the name TSMC raise any alarm bells to you? Maybe the fact that it's called Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company? Could there be any issues with that? Well, maybe the fact that the People's Republic of China, the PRC, the largest economy and likely second, and rapidly catching up to the first most powerful military in the world, wants to invade them? It is literally the most important part of China's national foreign policy to reunify with Taiwan. So I'm sure you can see the problem there. TSMC manufactures 90% of its chips at its home base in Taiwan, and these chips are necessary for the survival of the global economy. Now, China wants to either invade or occupy Taiwan, and they're actually serious about it. Look at these invasion barges just built in the last few months. And they know exactly how important this industry is to the collective West. So, in the event of war, TSMC's factories will be the number one target of the PRC, not to destroy them, but to use them for China and only China. Taiwan, of course, knows this, and so part of its national defense strategy is basically to hold the world's economy hostage in order to get mutual defense agreements. While the US is an ally of Taiwan in principle, it really only holds any interest in its defense because of this one set of factories. Ukraine should have thought of that one, SMH. And so even though TSMC is bringing fabs into the US by investing 65 billion into an Arizona foundry, and then announcing an additional 100 billion for another 5 US-based plants, it keeps its most advanced 2 nanometer production in Taiwan exclusively for now. So, yeah, that looks pretty bad. Trillions of dollars of market capitalization rest on China not invading a country that they say they will invade every year, while making actual invasion and/or blockade plans to starve the West of chips is not great. And oh yeah, ASML, the only company capable of equipping advanced fabs, they're based in the Netherlands, so good for them. The geopolitical risk is obviously less there. However, having a single supplier for the whole industry is not ideal. Perhaps it'd be a good idea to build a little more resilience and develop a little more expertise in implementing their technologies so that we don't have to balance our modern existence on the linkage of these two companies. Naturally, politicians and economists, and also industry experts, know all of this information. So, what are they doing to combat it? Well, of course, we've talked about TSMC's US factories, about 165 billion of total investment into US fabs, and another 20 billion into Japanese fabs, although a generation behind what's in Taiwan, of course. And Joe Biden did pass the CHIPS and Science Act, allocating 39 billion in subsidies to US fabs, some to TSMC, of course, and 13 billion to domestic semiconductor R&D. Now, Trump has called this act, quote, horrible, but he's probably a bit preoccupied to do anything about it at the moment. And he's all about domestic manufacturing, so not likely going to see anything there. Samsung is attempting to capitalize on this industry de-risking with plans for a new fab in Texas, but this still only really means two options instead of one, marginally better. So finally, you may be asking about Intel, the third of the semiconductor giants. Well, we don't know. Intel's gone through a little shakeup recently, so we're not sure what the fab business is going to look like. There's talks of a spin-off, a partnership with TSMC, or a complete shutdown due to the cash-heavy nature of running a fab and lack of expertise to actually implement ASML's technology. On the bright side, there's a little more resilience for the less complicated chips used in a wide variety of non-cutting edge applications. Texas Instruments, for example, makes more than just the TI-84 calculator. It has 15 production sites, most domestically, where it makes industry-respected chips for various application-specific functions like cars, computers, missiles, etc. And NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, knowing the threat of an oncoming trade war and wanting to protect its massive valuation, has just this past week announced plans to invest hundreds of billions in its U.S. supply chain to bring manufacturing out of Asia and into the U.S. And that's where we're left today. Not great for sure. With China's aggressiveness only getting worse and the demand or hype for chips, especially regarding AI on the rise, it looks like the industry is just waiting for a shock. If I was a politician, an executive, a purchaser at a company like Apple or Microsoft, I'd be up all night thinking of a solution. Naturally, shifting production to the US is slower and more expensive, but that's a price that must be paid to mitigate risk. And that price paid now is going to be well worth it when China strikes and the world looks like it's going to end. However, I'm not so sure we have the foresight to pay it up front. And so it looks like we're in for a real shock sometime in the next 5 years. And so that's the state of the modern semiconductor industry. You may believe the AI hype, but are you ready to face the dangerous truth of the little silicon devices that fuel this AI machine? Let me know what you think in the comments. Are we doing enough to mitigate this critical threat to modern society? What would you do as a supply chain professional? I'd be happy to engage with you. And if you have any additional topics you'd like to see covered, please let me know. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.